The floor drops away beneath my boots, and I am falling before I even understand that the trial has started. My name is Kale Ronan, and 3 seconds ago I was standing on solid metal. Now the whole platform tilts, alarms scream in a language that was never built for human ears, and the ceiling above me splits open to show a churning storm of debris moving fast enough to end a life in an instant. I grab the rail. My fingers slip. Someone grabs my wrist and hauls me back onto flat ground, and I turn to see Mira Ellison, breathing hard, already scanning for the next collapse point. "Move," she says. "This whole level is coming down." We run. This is what they call an aptitude trial. The Vareth Dominion built this place after they took Earth, not to kill us outright, but to sort us. Labor, soldier, disposal. Every conquered species goes through this. Every species gets measured, ranked, filed away into a number that tells the Dominion exactly how much a life is worth. I used to be a soldier, back when Earth still had an army worth the name. That ended the day the Dominion ships arrived in orbit and simply waited. No warning shots, no demands, just a silence that lasted 3 days, and then a broadcast that told humanity to stand down or be erased. We had no ships that could reach them, no weapon that could touch them, so we surrendered, and 3 months later I was standing in a line with thousands of others, being sorted like cargo. Now I run through a corridor that is folding in on itself, and behind me I hear Daniel Cross shouting for everyone to stay together, and Owen Blake counting heads like he does every single time, because he lost his brother in the first trial and has never stopped counting since. The corridor ends in a drop. 20 feet down, maybe more. No time to think. I jump. I land wrong, pain shooting up through my ankle, and Lena Marsh is there instantly, pulling me up before I can even register what just happened. "You're fine," she says. "Walk it off. We don't have time for fine." Behind us, the whole passage folds shut with a sound like the world ending. Dust rolls over us in a wave. For a moment, none of us can see. I press my back against a wall and try to breathe. This is the 4th trial in 6 weeks. The Dominion tells us these tests measure endurance, intelligence, cooperation. What they don't tell us is that the trials are designed to break us. Every other species that has come through this place thinned out fast. The Drask lost most of their number in trials like this. The Orn lost even more. The aliens running this program expect the same from us. They expect humans to fail, to die, to fall in line with the numbers on their charts. We haven't been falling in line. I don't know exactly when I noticed it. Maybe it was the 2nd trial, when half our group should have died crossing a flooded chamber, and instead every single one of us made it out, dragging each other through water that was supposed to be impossible to cross alone. Maybe it was the 3rd trial, when Owen worked out that the puzzle wasn't meant to be solved the way the Dominion designed it, and figured out a shortcut that saved us 2 hours and probably several lives. Whatever it was, something in me started paying attention. Above the settling dust, a voice comes over hidden speakers, cold and flat, translated into English by whatever system the Dominion uses for its livestock. "Test subjects," the voice says. "Proceed to the next chamber. Time remaining, 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Not much room to catch a breath. I push off the wall and start moving again, and the others fall in around me without needing to be told. We've done this enough times now that we don't need commands. Daniel takes the front, because he's fast and sharp-eyed. Owen stays close to the middle, watching for anything the trial designers might have hidden. Lena and Mira take the sides, and I bring up the back, because someone always needs to watch for what's coming from behind. The next chamber is worse than I expected. The floor is broken into moving sections, plates that shift and drop at random, and beyond them, a wall of light that the announcer calls the finish line, though I've learned by now that nothing in this place is as simple as it sounds. Daniel goes first, timing his steps against the shifting plates, and for a moment, it looks like he's found the pattern. Then the whole floor changes rhythm, and he almost goes down. Mira catches his arm just in time. "It's not a pattern," Owen says, watching from the edge. "It's random. There's no rhythm to catch." "Then how do we cross?" Lena asks. I look at the moving plates, at the gaps opening and closing without warning, and something clicks in my mind, the same way it did during the second trial. The Dominion built this to test individual skill, reflexes, timing, the kind of thing they can measure and compare against other species. But they never accounted for what happens when 5 people stop acting like 5 people and start acting like one. Chain, I say. Grab hands. If one of us starts to go down, the rest of us pull them back before the plate finishes dropping. Daniel looks doubtful for half a second, then nods, because he trusts me, and because there isn't time to argue. We link hands and step onto the plates together. It should not work. 5 people moving as one, across a floor built to catch individuals off guard, should be clumsy, slow, easy to trip up. But something happens when we move together that the trial designers never planned for. When one of us stumbles, the grip of the others holds them up long enough to find footing again. When a plate drops beneath Lena, we haul her across the gap before she can fall through. When the far end shifts without warning under my own feet, 4 hands catch me and drag me forward before I even feel the ground disappear. We reach the wall of light together, all 5 of us, with seconds left on whatever clock the Dominion is running behind that cold voice. The light fades, revealing a viewing chamber above us, alien shapes moving behind reinforced glass, watching, recording. I can't read their expressions, if they even have expressions the way we do, but I imagine surprise there. I imagine confusion, because we shouldn't have made it, not according to whatever chart they built to describe us. The 4 of us stand there, chests heaving, and for a moment, nobody says anything. Then Owen, always careful, always counting, breaks the silence. Everyone's here, he says. Nobody left behind. 4th trial in a row. Mira wipes sweat from her forehead and looks up at the viewing chamber, at the shapes watching us like specimens in a jar. They keep making it harder, she says. And we keep getting through. They'll notice eventually, Daniel says. I look up at the glass too, at the alien shapes shifting behind it, murmuring to each other in a language I can't understand, and a strange thought settles into my chest, something between hope and warning. They already have. We are led out of the chamber by handlers who never speak more than they have to, back through corridors that were designed to feel endless, meant to remind us that we are guests in a place we do not control. I walk past rows of holding cells filled with other conquered species, some resting, some staring blankly at nothing, worn down by trials that have taken everything from them. None of them look at us the way they used to. In the early weeks, other species glanced at humans with something like pity, assuming we would fall the same way they had. Now some of them watch us pass with a different look, something closer to attention, maybe even something closer to hope. I don't know what to make of that yet. I only know that 4 trials in, my cohort is still whole, still walking, still counting every single person at the end of every single test. That night, in the cramped holding quarters we share, Owen counts heads one more time out of habit, even though nothing has changed since the last count an hour ago. Lena sits with her back against the wall, eyes closed, saving energy for whatever comes next. Daniel paces near the door, restless, always restless. Mira sits beside me, quiet for once. You noticed it too, she says. Didn't you? The way we moved together. Yeah, I say, I noticed. They didn't build these tests for that, she says. They built them for people who solve problems alone. We're breaking the shape of the test just by working together. I think about the moving floor, about 5 sets of hands refusing to let go of each other, about a system built by an empire that has never seen anything like us, and something settles in my chest that feels dangerously close to hope. Maybe that's the point, I say. Maybe that's the thing they never planned for. Outside our quarters, past thick reinforced walls, I hear the distant hum of machinery resetting the trial chambers for tomorrow. Somewhere above us, in rooms we will never be allowed to enter, alien researchers are looking over data that does not match their models. Numbers that keep climbing when they are supposed to fall. Survival rates that keep rising when every other species thinned out by now. I don't know yet how far this goes. I don't know that somewhere in those rooms, an administrator named Thesic is staring at a screen full of results that should not exist, wondering if the numbers are wrong, or if something about humanity was never properly measured at all. All I know, lying in the dark with 4 people who trust me with their lives, is that tomorrow there will be another trial, and we will face it exactly the way we faced this one. Together. Administrator Thesic stares at a screen that refuses to make sense. I don't see this happen. I only learn about it much later, from records that eventually fall into human hands. But it matters, because this is the moment everything begins to shift, even if none of us in the holding quarters know it yet. Thesic has overseen the aptitude trials for the Vareth Dominion across 11 conquered worlds. Every species follows the same pattern. Strong individuals survive early rounds. The group thins as trials increase in difficulty. By the 5th round, only the most capable specimens remain, and those become soldiers or specialists. The rest are filed away for labor, or worse. Humans are not following the pattern. By the 5th trial, our cohort has lost nobody, not one person. Thesic has run this program long enough to know that should be impossible. The Drask lost 60% of their number by round 5. The Orn lost even more. Every species Thesic has ever processed thins out according to a curve so reliable it has practically become law. Humans are breaking the curve. Thesic orders a full review of the trial data, certain there has been an error somewhere in the systems, some fault in the simulation parameters that is making the tests too easy. The review finds nothing wrong. The trials are functioning exactly as designed, which means the anomaly is not in the test. It is in us. I know none of this while it happens. What I know is that the 5th trial begins with a warning I've never heard before. Test subjects. The cold voice announces, "This trial has been adjusted for accurate calibration. Proceed with caution." Adjusted. That word settles into my stomach like a stone before the chamber doors even open. The trial that follows is unlike anything we've faced. Instead of one obstacle, we face 3 at once, layered on top of each other, each one alone difficult enough to end a trial, all 3 together designed to overwhelm anyone trying to manage them at the same time. Falling debris above us, unstable ground beneath us, and somewhere in the chamber, a rotating barrier of light that burns anything it touches. Daniel goes down first, catching a support strut across the shoulder as the ceiling shifts. He doesn't fall, but he stumbles, and for a moment I think we're about to lose someone for the first time. Then Lena is there, taking his weight, and Mira is already 3 steps ahead, calling out the pattern of the rotating light barrier that she's somehow already mapped in her head. 6 seconds open, 2 seconds closed, she shouts. Move on my count. We move on her count. All 5 of us, timing our steps against a barrier that has already burned 2 other test groups from other species in previous rounds, according to markings on the walls that I try not to look at too closely. We make it through. Barely. Daniel's shoulder is bruised badly enough that he can barely lift his arm, but he's alive. We're all alive, and once again we cross the finish line together. The viewing chamber above us is fuller this time. More alien shapes pressed against the glass, watching, murmuring. I catch sight of one figure closer to the glass than the rest, still and silent, studying us longer than any of the others. I don't know it yet, but that is Thesic, watching the anomaly in person for the first time. That night, back in our quarters, something new happens. A message is passed to us through one of the maintenance staff, a quiet Vareth worker who has shown small kindnesses before. Nothing that could get anyone in serious trouble. Just a look, a pause, a moment where the rules bend slightly. The message says other human cohorts have started asking questions about us. Word has spread through the holding blocks that one group has survived 5 trials without a single loss. They're calling us the whole cohort, Owen says, reading the note with something like disbelief. Like it's strange that we're all still here. It is strange, Mira says. According to whatever they expect from us, it shouldn't be possible. Daniel winces, testing his shoulder. Then let's keep being impossible. I laugh, and it feels good to laugh, Even here, even now. But the mood shifts fast when the maintenance worker returns 2 days later with different news. Thesic has ordered the 6th trial redesigned specifically around our cohort. Not around all humans, around us. 5 specific names, cross-referenced against every trial we've completed, every choice we've made, every moment of cooperation the sensors recorded. They are building a test meant to break exactly what we've built between us. I feel something cold settle in my chest when I hear this. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to anger. They want to isolate us, I say. Force us apart. See if we still perform without each other. Can they do that? Lena asks. They can do anything, Mira says quietly. This is their arena. Their rules. The 6th trial begins differently from every one before it. Instead of one chamber, we are separated into 5 different starting points. Sealed doors keeping us apart, alone, facing individual versions of the same obstacle course we've faced together every time before. I stand alone in a corridor that used to feel survivable when I had 4 other people beside me. Now it feels like a tomb. Test Subject 4. The voice announces. Proceed alone. Cooperation protocols disabled for this trial. I understand immediately what they are testing. Whether our success has been real skill or simply the trick of numbers, 5 people covering each other's weaknesses. Whether I, alone, without Owen's careful eyes, or Mira's quick thinking, or Lena's steady hands, or Daniel's speed, am worth anything at all. The obstacle begins, and for the first time in 6 trials, I am truly on my own. The ceiling above me buckles, the same falling debris pattern from the 5th trial, except now there is no Mira mapping timing beside me, no Lena catching my arm when I stumble. Just me, and a countdown, and a design built to break someone who has learned to depend on people who aren't there anymore. I almost freeze. For one long moment, standing under a ceiling ready to fall, I feel the absence of my cohort like a physical weight. Then I remember something Owen said once, quietly, after the 3rd trial. He said the trick was never really about 5 people being strong together. It was about paying attention, watching the trial itself, not the people around us. The reason we worked as a group was that we each brought a different kind of attention to the same problem. And once you've learned to watch a certain way, you don't stop just because you're alone. I start watching the ceiling the way Mira would. I start listening for the ground shifting the way Lena always did. I move like I have 4 other sets of eyes, even though there is nobody here but me, because somewhere over the last 6 trials, I picked up pieces of each of them, and those pieces don't disappear just because the doors are sealed. I make it through. Barely. Alone. When the sealed doors finally open, and I stumble back into the group chamber, I find Daniel already there, breathing hard, favoring his bruised shoulder. Then Lena. Then Owen. Then, last of all, Mira, moving slower than I've ever seen her move, a burn mark along her arm from a barrier she must have misjudged, without anyone there to call the timing for her. All 5 of us, alive, alone, and still, somehow, whole. The viewing chamber above goes quiet in a way I've never heard before. No murmuring, no shifting shapes, just silence, heavy and complete, as 5 separated humans stand together again in a chamber built to prove we needed each other to survive. We proved something different instead. We proved that whatever we built together didn't disappear when we were pulled apart. It became part of each of us. Later, in the records I eventually see, Thesic writes a report that never gets a satisfying answer. The report notes that cooperative bonds among human test subjects appear to transfer into individual capability, a pattern with no precedent among any previously catalogued species. The report recommends further study. I don't need a report to tell me what happened in that trial. I felt it happen, alone under a collapsing ceiling, carrying pieces of 4 other people who weren't even in the room. That night, Owen counts heads one more time, the same as always. 5, all present, all accounted for. 6 trials, he says quietly. Nobody lost, not even when they tried to take us apart. Daniel manages a tired smile despite his shoulder. They keep raising the difficulty, he says, and we keep finding a way through it. Mira, resting her burned arm carefully against her side, looks toward the ceiling, toward the unseen rooms where administrators like Thesic are surely staring at numbers that refuse to behave the way numbers are supposed to behave. They're not testing us anymore, she says. Not really. I think they're trying to understand us, and I don't think they can. I lie awake long after the others fall asleep, thinking about the corridor I crossed alone, about the 4 sets of eyes I carried with me even when the doors sealed shut. I think about the maintenance workers' warning, about Thesic's redesigned trial, about the fact that somewhere above us, an entire empire's understanding of conquered species is starting to crack under the weight of results that refuse to fit the model. I don't know yet how far this goes. I don't know that the 7th trial will be worse than anything we've faced so far, designed not just to separate us, but to force a choice none of us should have to make. I don't know that somewhere in the Dominion's higher command, voices are already starting to argue about whether humanity is a curiosity worth continued study, or a problem that needs to be handled before it grows any larger. All I know, lying in the dark with the quiet breathing of 4 people who trusted me enough to cross an impossible trial alone and still come back whole, is that we are no longer just surviving. We are starting to become something the Dominion never planned for. The 7th trial does not begin with falling debris or shifting floors. It begins with a door that opens onto a room full of other people, and a voice that tells us only some of us are meant to leave. Test subjects, the cold voice announces. This trial requires reduction of surplus population. Remaining capacity for advancement, 40%. Proceed accordingly. I stand in a wide chamber with my cohort and dozens of others, all of us pulled from different holding blocks, all of us hearing the same impossible instruction at the same time, 40%. Out of nearly 200 people crowded into this room, only a fraction are meant to walk out the far door. Nobody tells us how to decide who stays and who doesn't. Nobody tells us what happens to the rest. The silence around that question is worse than any answer could be. For a moment, nobody moves. 200 people, all conquered, all sorted like cargo for months, stand frozen under a demand that feels designed to turn us against each other. I look at Owen, at Lena, at Daniel, at Mira, and I know without a single word passing between us that none of us is willing to buy our own passage through this door by pushing someone else out of the running. This isn't a trial, I say, loud enough for the chamber to hear. This is a cage match. They want to see if we'll turn on each other. A woman near the front, older than most of us, with tired eyes and a voice that carries authority even now, steps forward. Her name, I later learn, is Grace Hallow, once a teacher back on Earth, now just another number in the Dominion's files. They've done this before, she says, to other species. Every time, the group thins itself out, fighting for the spots. That's what they expect. Then we don't fight, I say. We don't play their game. Daniel looks at me like I've lost my mind. There's a door on the other side of this room that only opens for a percentage of us. How do we not play the game? I look around the chamber, at the walls, at the ceiling, at the far door sealed shut, and something Owen taught me during the 6th trial comes back to me. Watch the trial, not the people. The Dominion built this room to force us into competition, but the room itself is the actual obstacle, and rooms can be studied the same way collapsing ceilings and shifting floors can be studied. There has to be a way through that door that doesn't depend on how many of us they let out, I say. A trial has rules. Rules can be found. Rules can be used. Owen is already moving along the edges of the chamber, running his hands over seams in the wall that most people wouldn't even notice. Mira studies the far door itself, watching for any pattern in the reinforced locks. Lena checks the ceiling, the same way she always does, looking for weaknesses nobody else thinks to look for. It takes almost 20 minutes, with the tension in the room climbing every second, before Owen finds it. A maintenance seam behind a support column, clearly not meant for test subjects to notice, clearly built for the Dominion's own staff to access during resets between trials. This isn't part of the test, he says. This is a service access point. If I can open it, then we don't need their door at all, I finish. Grace Hallow looks between us, something like hope breaking through the exhaustion on her face for the first time. You want to bypass the entire trial. I want everyone in this room to leave, I say. Not 40%. Everyone. It should not work. Owen is not an engineer. None of us have training in Dominion technology, but 6 trials have taught him to read patterns quickly, and the panel behind the column responds to careful, patient work in a way that feels almost too easy, as if nobody at the Dominion ever expected livestock to look this closely at the walls of their own cage. The panel opens onto a narrow service corridor, dimly lit, clearly not meant for test subjects, clearly a path the Dominion never intended us to find. For a moment, the entire chamber holds its breath, weighing a choice that suddenly feels enormous. Follow the rules, compete for a limited exit, and accept that some of us will not make it through, or step outside the rules entirely into a path nobody sanctioned, with no idea what waits at the other end. Grace Hallow looks at the crowd, then at the open panel, then back at me. If we're wrong about this, she says quietly, we could be walking into something far worse than losing the trial. If we're right, I say, nobody in this room loses anything today. The decision that follows takes seconds, though it feels much longer. 200 people, strangers to each other in most cases, choose together to step outside the rules of a system built by an empire that has never once asked what any of us actually wanted. We move through the service corridor in a long, careful line, Owen leading, Lena and Mira watching for anything the Dominion might use to stop us, Daniel and I bringing up the rear, making sure nobody falls behind. Grace Hallow moves through the crowd calming people, keeping panic from spreading in the tight, dim space. The corridor eventually opens into a control area, clearly meant for Dominion staff only, humming with equipment none of us fully understand. And here, for the first time, we are noticed. An alarm sounds, sharp and sudden, and Dominion security personnel converge on the control area faster than I expect. For a moment I think everything is about to fall apart, that 200 people have walked directly into a trap far worse than the one we tried to avoid. Then something happens that I still find hard to describe, even now. The security forces expect us to scatter, to panic, the way every other species has when cornered in unfamiliar territory. Instead, 200 people who were strangers an hour ago move together, using the narrow corridor to our advantage, using numbers the Dominion never planned around. Daniel and I hold the rear point, buying time. Lena and Mira guide people through side passages Owen spots on the fly, adjusting our path in real time as security tries to box us in. Nobody among us is a soldier trained for this exact moment, except me, and even my training never covered something like this. But something in the room shifts as people realize, all at once, that working together against impossible odds is not a new idea to us anymore. We have spent 6 trials learning exactly how to do this. We disable the systems locking the far exit doors, not through any special skill, but through sheer numbers working every panel and access point Owen identifies, faster than the handful of security staff can respond to all of us at once. Doors that were built to control 200 separate individuals were never designed to withstand 200 people acting as one. When the doors finally open onto a wider holding area, alarms still blaring behind us, every single person from that chamber walks through. All 200, nobody left behind. Administrator Thesic, I later learn, watches this entire event unfold from a monitoring station, and for the first time in a long career overseeing conquered species, the model breaks in a way that cannot be explained away as a calibration error. The report Thesic eventually files describes what happened in careful, clinical language, numbers and percentages and probability curves. But even that clinical language cannot hide the plain fact underneath it. 200 humans, facing a trial built to divide them, chose instead to move as a single body, and succeeded where individual competition should have thinned their number by more than half. The response from Dominion leadership is immediate and heavy. Extra security floods our block within the hour. Movement between holding areas is restricted. Past messages are searched more carefully. For a few days, it feels as though the walls have closed in tighter than ever before. But something has already gotten out that the Dominion cannot take back. Recordings of the 7th trial, damaged sensor logs, fragments of the event begin circulating quietly through other holding blocks, carried by workers and staff sympathetic enough to risk passing along what they saw. Other species, watching from behind their own reinforced glass, begin to hear whispers about what the pale-skinned test subjects did. I don't fully understand the size of what we started until Grace Hallow finds me a few days later, during a rare, quiet moment between trials, her voice low, careful. "They're calling it something," she says. "The workers who saw it happen. They have a name for what your group started." "What name?" I ask. "They're calling it the day the room broke," she says, "because it wasn't just a trial that failed. It was the whole idea behind these trials, the idea that conquered species always thin themselves out under pressure. 200 of us just proved that idea wrong, in front of an audience that included representatives from at least 3 other empires watching the Dominion's methods." I sit with that for a long moment, thinking about the panel behind the support column, about Owen's careful hands finding a way through, about 200 strangers choosing to trust each other in a room built to make us afraid of one another. They always assumed we had a ceiling, I say slowly, almost to myself. A limit, like every other species they've measured. That's why the trials keep escalating. They're trying to find where we break. Grace Hallow looks at me with something between exhaustion and quiet fire. "And what happens," she says, "when they never find it?" I don't have an answer for her that night. But over the following days, as whispers of the 7th trial continue to spread through the holding blocks, as other cohorts start asking questions about how we did it, as even other species begin watching us with something closer to curiosity than pity, I start to understand that the question itself has become the point. The Dominion built an empire on the assumption that every conquered people eventually finds its limit, breaks, and falls into whatever role the numbers assign it. For generations, that assumption has held true across dozens of worlds. It did not hold true in a chamber built to force 200 strangers into competition. I think about Thesic, somewhere above us, staring at reports that no longer make sense, revising models that keep failing, running the same tests over and over, trying to explain results that refuse to fit any pattern the Dominion has ever recorded. I think about my own cohort, Owen counting heads each night, Lena watching ceilings for weaknesses nobody else notices, Mira mapping patterns in barriers built to burn, Daniel moving faster than any single trial should allow, and all of us, together, becoming something none of us fully understand yet. I think about Grace Hallow's question, and I realize that somewhere in the last 7 trials, without any of us deciding it consciously, we stopped trying to survive the Dominion's tests. We started proving that the tests themselves were built on a mistake. That night, lying in the dark with the sounds of increased security patrols echoing faintly through the corridors outside, I understand, for the first time, that whatever happens next will not stay contained within these walls. Word has already spread too far. Other species are already watching too closely. The Dominion has already lost something it cannot easily take back, the simple, comfortable certainty that every conquered people eventually finds its breaking point. They built an empire on that certainty. We just showed an audience of watching worlds that the certainty was never as solid as they believed. 3 weeks after the 7th trial, a woman named Ivy Sorensen finds me in the corridor outside our holding block, moving with the quiet urgency of someone who has spent a long time learning how not to be noticed. "You're the one they call the whole cohort," she says. "It isn't a question. Word travels fast," I say. "Word travels everywhere now," she says. "Faster than the Dominion can control it. That's actually why I'm here." Ivy is not a test subject. She works maintenance across 3 different holding blocks, which means she moves through parts of this station most of us never see, and she has apparently been carrying messages between human groups for weeks, ever since news of the 7th trial started spreading. There are at least 6 other human cohorts on this station, she tells me, keeping her voice low. All of them have heard what your group did. Some of them have started doing the same thing, refusing to compete against each other, finding the gaps in the trials instead of fighting over the exits. I feel something shift in my chest, half hope, half fear. The Dominion knows this is happening. The Dominion knows, Ivy confirms. That's the part you need to understand. This isn't just about your cohort passing trials anymore. Something bigger is happening, and it's happening fast. She explains, in careful pieces over several rushed conversations across the following days, what has changed since the day the room broke. Other conquered species, watching recordings and hearing accounts of what happened, have started testing the same idea in their own trials. A group of Drask test subjects, facing a similar culling trial 2 blocks over, refused to compete against each other for the first time in the history of the program. They didn't succeed the way we did. Not fully, but they tried, and that alone has never happened before. Word of that attempt spread even further than word of our own trial did, because it proved something the Dominion desperately did not want proven, that whatever happened with the humans was not some strange quirk of one species. It was an idea, and ideas move faster than any wall the Dominion can build. There's something else, Ivy says, on the last day before the 8th trial begins. Higher up than Thesic. There's disagreement now about what to do with all of you. Disagreement how? I ask. Some want humanity removed from the program entirely, she says. Ended, before this spreads any further. Others want the opposite. They want to weaponize what you're doing, turn cooperation into something they can control and use. I think about that for a long time after Ivy leaves. The idea that somewhere above us, in rooms none of us will ever see, powerful people are arguing over whether to erase an entire species or turn it into a weapon, based entirely on what a handful of us did in one crowded chamber. The 8th trial, when it finally comes, feels different from every trial before it. Less like a test, more like a message. The chamber is larger than anything we've faced, built to hold not just my cohort, but 7 other human groups at once, gathered from across the station for the first time. Test subjects, the cold voice announces. This trial will measure coordinated response across multiple units. Proceed with full cooperation permitted. Full cooperation permitted. I look around at Owen, at Lena, at Mira, at Daniel, and I can see the same disbelief on their faces that I feel in my own chest. The Dominion is no longer trying to stop us from working together. They are testing exactly how far it can go when they let it happen on purpose. Grace Hallow finds me in the crowd before the trial begins, her presence steady among dozens of unfamiliar faces from other cohorts. They're not fighting the idea anymore, she says. They're studying it, trying to understand how far this scales. Then let's show them, I say. The trial that follows is the hardest thing I have ever faced, not because of any single obstacle, but because of scale. 8 cohorts, 40 people, moving through a chamber built with challenges layered 5 times larger than anything from earlier trials. Falling debris across an area the size of a stadium. Shifting floors stretching farther than any single group could hope to cross alone. Barriers of burning light rotating in patterns too complex for any 5 people to map by themselves. But we are not 5 people anymore. We are 40, and within minutes of the trial beginning, something remarkable happens. Groups that have never met before, cohorts that formed independently in different holding blocks, begin falling into the same rhythm my own group discovered weeks ago. Watch the trial, not the people. Cover each other's weaknesses. Never leave anyone behind. Daniel ends up coordinating timing across 3 different groups crossing the shifting floor sections, his speed and sharp eyes suddenly serving 40 people instead of 4. Owen works alongside 2 engineers from another cohort, all 3 of them finding weaknesses in the trial's construction faster together than any of them could alone. Mira maps burning barrier patterns for groups she has never spoken to before this hour, calling out timing to strangers who trust her instantly, because word of what our cohort has done has clearly reached every corner of this station. I find myself doing something I never expected, coordinating movement across the entire chamber, watching 40 people the way I once watched only 4, and somehow it works. Not because I have some special gift for it, but because everyone around me is doing the same thing, watching each other, adjusting, covering gaps before they become dangerous. We cross the chamber together, all 40 of us, not a single person lost. The viewing gallery above, when we finally reach the far side, is packed tighter than I have ever seen it. Dozens of alien shapes pressed against the glass, and this time I can make out enough of their posture, their stillness, to understand that what they are witnessing has shaken something in them that goes far beyond simple data collection. Administrator Thesic stands closest to the glass, according to accounts I hear later from station workers who witnessed it firsthand. Thesic apparently stands there long after the trial ends, staring down at 40 humans standing together in a chamber built to prove that cooperation on this scale should not be possible, watching numbers on a report that no longer resemble anything the Dominion has ever recorded from any conquered species. That night, back in our now crowded holding block, shared temporarily with 3 other cohorts while the station reorganizes housing after the trial, Grace Hallow gathers a small group together, quietly, carefully. "This is bigger than any of us now," she says. "Word of what happened today will reach every corner of this station within hours, and from there, every ship the Dominion sends anywhere near occupied space. We are not going to stay a quiet anomaly buried in some testing program much longer." "What happens then?" Lena asks. Grace Hallow looks around the room, at faces from 4 different cohorts, people who were strangers a day ago and now share something none of them can fully name yet. "Then we stop being a curiosity they study," she says, "and start being a question they have to answer." Ivy Sorensen finds me again 2 days later, this time with news that changes the shape of everything. A group of station workers, sympathetic to what has been happening, have identified a weakness in the Dominion's command structure aboard this very station, a central hub that coordinates trial data, security responses, and communication with the wider Dominion fleet. "There's a possibility," Ivy says carefully, "of doing more than surviving trials, of sending a message the entire Dominion cannot ignore." I feel the weight of that sentence settle over me slowly. "You're talking about striking the command hub." "I'm talking about choice," Ivy says. "You and your people have spent 8 trials proving something extraordinary. But proving it inside a cage only goes so far. If you want the rest of the galaxy to actually hear it, you need to reach beyond the cage itself." That night, I gather my own cohort together, along with Grace Hallow and a handful of others who have become something like leaders among the growing network of human groups across the station. "This isn't a trial anymore," I tell them. "If we do this, there's no controlled chamber, no calibrated difficulty, no guarantee any of us walks away." "When has that ever stopped us?" Daniel says quietly. Owen counts the room out of old habit, even though this decision has nothing to do with survival numbers anymore. "If we're doing this," he says, "we do it together, all of us, same as always." Mira looks at me steadily. "You've been thinking about this since Ivy first found you," she says. "It isn't a question either. I don't deny it." Lena, quiet as always until the moment truly calls for her voice, speaks last. "They built an entire program around finding our limit," she says. 8 trials, and they never found it. Maybe it's time we show them exactly what happens when they stop looking inside a chamber and start looking at what we do when there isn't one at all. Grace Hallow watches all of us for a long moment, weighing something heavy behind her tired eyes. "If we do this," she says finally, "we are no longer just subjects in a testing program. We become something the Dominion has to take seriously, for better or worse." I think about Thesic, standing at that glass, watching 40 humans cross an impossible chamber together. I think about the argument Ivy described happening somewhere above us, powerful voices deciding whether to erase humanity or weaponize it, based on results none of them expected and none of them can fully explain. I think about a species that has spent months proving, trial after trial, that whatever ceiling the Dominion expected to find in us simply does not exist. Then let's give them an answer, I say. They can't ignore. Around me, in a crowded room shared by 4 cohorts who were strangers only weeks ago, nobody argues, nobody hesitates. Whatever we started in that first collapsing chamber has grown into something far larger than any of us imagined, and for the first time since the Dominion ships first arrived in Earth's sky, I feel something that isn't just determination. I feel the quiet, steady certainty of people who have stopped asking whether they can survive, and started deciding what they are going to do next. The service corridor Ivy Sorensen leads us through smells like heated metal and old dust, and every step forward feels like a step off the edge of everything familiar. There are 11 of us moving through this narrow passage toward the command hub. Myself, Owen, Lena, Mira, and Daniel, along with Grace Hallow and 5 others drawn from the growing network of human cohorts across the station. Ivy walks ahead, guiding us through paths only station workers know, paths the Dominion never expected test subjects to reach. Once we're past this junction, Ivy says quietly, there's no controlled trial waiting on the other side. No calibrated difficulty, just the actual station and actual consequences. We understand, I say. She looks at me for a long moment, then nods and keeps moving. The command hub, when we finally reach its outer access point, hums with the quiet, constant energy of a system built to coordinate an entire station's worth of trials, security, and communication with the wider Dominion fleet. Ivy explains, in hushed, hurried words, what we already suspected. This hub is not just the nerve center for this station's testing program. It is a relay point feeding data to Dominion Command across occupied space, including every report Thesic has filed about humanity's unexplained results. Owen studies the access panel sealing the hub's outer door, the same careful, patient focus he brought to every service seam and locking mechanism we've encountered since the very first trials. This is more complex than anything I've worked with before, he says. But the principle's the same. Every system has a seam. I just need time to find it. Time is the one thing we don't have much of. Security response across the station has tightened considerably since the 8th trial, and every minute we spend at this door increases the chance of discovery. Lena watches the corridor behind us, alert for any sign of approaching guards. Mira studies the layout Ivy sketched for us, looking for weaknesses in the hub's internal structure the same way she once mapped burning barrier patterns. Daniel stays close to Owen, ready to move the instant the door gives way. Grace Hallow keeps the rest of our small group steady, calm, focused, the same quiet strength she brought to 200 frightened strangers back in the 7th trial. The door finally opens, and we move inside. The interior of the command hub is nothing like the chambers we've grown used to. No falling debris, no shifting floors, just rows of quiet, humming equipment and a handful of Dominion personnel who freeze in shock at the sight of 11 humans standing where no test subject has ever been permitted to stand. What follows happens fast, faster than I expect, though slower than it feels in the moment. Security alarms begin sounding within seconds, but we are not the same people who once ran, frightened, through our first collapsing chamber. 8 trials have taught us how to move as one body, how to cover each other's weaknesses instantly, how to adapt to a situation the instant it changes shape. Daniel reaches the central console first, working alongside Owen to disable the hub's outgoing communications before Dominion Command elsewhere can be alerted. Mira and Lena hold the entry point, using equipment scattered through the hub to slow the first wave of responding security long enough for the rest of us to work. Grace Hallow and the others secure the personnel inside the hub, calm and firm, making clear that nobody here needs to come to harm if they simply stand down. It is not clean. It is not easy. Someone from our group takes a hard fall near the entry point, and for a terrible moment, I think we are about to lose someone for the first time since that very first trial. But Lena is there instantly, just as she has been every single time, pulling them back from danger before it becomes something worse. In the middle of the chaos, a figure steps into the hub's main chamber that I recognize immediately, though I have never stood this close before. Administrator Thesic, flanked by security personnel, stops abruptly at the sight of me standing at the center of everything. For a long moment, neither of us moves. "You are the one they call the whole cohort," Thesic says, the translated voice carrying something I have never heard from a Dominion official before, something close to genuine confusion. "I have a name," I say, Kale Ronan. Thesic studies me the way I imagine a scientist studies a result that refuses to fit years of careful theory. 8 trials, Thesic says. Every calibration increased, every variable adjusted, and your survival rate has not simply held steady, it has climbed. This should not be possible. "You built your whole program on an assumption," I say, "that every species eventually finds its limit, breaks under enough pressure, falls into whatever place you decide it belongs. Every species we have ever tested has confirmed that assumption," Thesic says. "Then maybe you tested us wrong," I say. "Or maybe humanity was never something your models could measure properly in the first place." Thesic is quiet for a moment, and I see something shift behind those unfamiliar eyes, something that might be the closest thing to genuine curiosity a Dominion administrator has ever shown a piece of livestock. "Why?" Thesic asks finally. "Why do you keep refusing to break? Every trial designed specifically to separate you, to divide you, to force competition among you, and every time, you find another way through it together. What is it in your species that refuses this outcome?" I think about my cohort, about Owen counting heads every single night without fail, about Lena catching every falling body before it hits the ground, about Mira mapping impossible patterns until they become simple, about Daniel's restless energy that never once left someone behind, about Grace Hallow steadying 200 strangers in a chamber built to turn them against each other. Because somewhere along the way, I say, we stopped thinking about surviving your trials and started thinking about each other. You built a program to measure how far pressure could push a species before it broke. We were never trying to prove we could survive that pressure alone. We were proving that we don't have to face it alone at all. Around us, the hub falls quiet as Daniel and Owen finish disabling the last of the outgoing communication systems, cutting this station off from immediate Dominion command elsewhere in occupied space, at least for now. Grace Hallow signals that the personnel inside are secured, unharmed, simply standing down as instructed. Thesic looks around the hub, at 11 humans who have just taken control of a facility built to coordinate an entire empire's testing program, and something in that alien posture, still and quiet, looks almost like defeat. "You understand," Thesic says slowly, "that this changes nothing about the wider Dominion. Other administrators, other fleets, other command structures far beyond this single station. What you have done here today will not end an empire." "No," I agree. "It won't, not today." "Then why do this at all?" I think about Ivy's words weeks ago, about a message the entire Dominion cannot ignore. I think about other species watching recordings of the 7th trial, about a group of Drask test subjects trying, for the first time in their history, to refuse competition against each other. I think about whispers already spreading faster than any wall the Dominion can build. "Because you needed proof," I say. "Real proof, not just numbers on a report you could quietly file away and argue about behind closed doors. You needed to see, with your own eyes, standing in the middle of your own command hub, exactly how far this actually goes. Today isn't the end of anything. It's the moment the rest of the galaxy finally gets to hear the same thing you're hearing right now." We leave the command hub roughly 40 minutes after entering it. Communication systems disabled, personnel unharmed, every member of our small group walking out on their own feet. It is not a clean victory. Bruises, exhaustion, and the fall Lena caught near the entry point will all leave their mark. But everyone who walked in with us walks out with us, the same as every single trial before this one. Ivy meets us at the far end of the service corridor, relief plain across her face. "It's already spreading," she says. "The recordings, the disabled systems, word of what just happened here. Every ship connected to this station's network will know within hours. And from there, every world the Dominion has ever touched." Grace Hallow looks back toward the command hub, now quiet behind us, and something like quiet awe settles over her tired features. We just told an entire empire, she says, that the thing they built their whole system around was never true. That night, gathered with my cohort and the wider network of humans who have become something between allies and family over these past months, I sit near a narrow viewport that looks out onto open space, distant stars scattered across the dark. Somewhere out there, Dominion ships that have never once doubted their own authority are receiving reports they cannot easily explain away. Somewhere out there, other conquered species are hearing, for the first time, that the pattern holding their own worlds in place might not be as solid as they were always told. Owen counts heads one final time that night, the same old habit, though we both know by now that he isn't really counting for survival anymore. He's counting because it has become who we are, a small ritual that reminds all of us how far we have come since that very first collapsing chamber. Everyone's here, he says quietly, same as always. Daniel manages a tired smile, still favoring the shoulder that has ached since the 5th trial. So what happens now, he asks, after all of this? I look out at the stars scattered across the dark, at an empire that built its entire understanding of conquered species on an assumption that just failed in front of its own command hub, and I think about Thesic's question, still echoing in my mind. Why do you keep refusing to break? I don't know exactly what happens now, I say honestly, but I know they spent months trying to find our limit, trial after trial, each one harder than the last, each one designed to finally show them where humanity runs out of whatever makes us keep going. Mira looks at me, waiting. They never found it, I say. Not because we're stronger than every other species they've ever conquered. Not because we have some special gift none of them share. They never found our limit because we stopped facing their trials as separate people trying to survive alone and started facing them as something else entirely, something they never accounted for in any of their models. Lena, quiet as always until the words truly matter, speaks softly into the dark. Maybe that's the actual answer, she says. Maybe humanity was never given power. We were only ever given pressure, and it turns out pressure, applied long enough, against people who refuse to let go of each other, doesn't break something. It builds something instead. Grace Hallow, standing near the viewport, looking out at that same scattering of distant stars, nods slowly at words that feel bigger than any single trial, bigger than any single hub or station or empire. They pushed us, she says quietly, further than they ever pushed anyone else, further than they should have. Now word of what that pressure built is already moving faster than any fleet they can send to stop it. I sit with that thought long into the night, watching distant lights that represent entire worlds, entire species, entire empires that have never once had reason to look closely at a species like ours. Somewhere among those lights, ships are moving, command structures are arguing, administrators like Thesic are filing reports that will never again sit comfortably within the old assumptions. Somewhere among those lights, an entire galaxy is beginning, for the very first time, to feel something it has never had reason to feel about humanity before. Uncertainty. And I understand, sitting quietly with the people who taught me that pressure is never the same thing as a limit, that this is only the beginning of something far larger than any of us fully understand yet. The Dominion spent months searching for the edge of what humanity could endure. They never found it. And now, across a galaxy that has always assumed conquered species eventually break the same predictable way, word is spreading of a people who simply refuse to stop, refuse to let go of each other, refuse to accept that pressure was ever meant to be the end of the story. Somewhere out among those distant lights, I know without any doubt at all, the universe is only just beginning to feel the first tremors of something it never saw coming.